Aquarius. There are moments in life when everything on the outside seems exactly the same, but something within you is no longer what it used to be. It's not a dramatic shift. There's no clear turning point, no obvious sign you can name. It's just, you've started to see money differently, lighter, less pressure, and strangely, more grounded. Some old thoughts begin to fall away, like a coat you've worn for far too long. You're no longer trying to control everything. That constant feeling of having to chase something ahead, it starts to fade. Instead, you pause a little longer. You observe more carefully, and you begin to notice. There are things quietly shifting in a way that feels entirely your own. Not everyone can see it, but you can feel it. And maybe it's from these very subtle signals that something new is beginning to unfold. There are phases in life when everything seems to be moving the same as always. The numbers stay the same. The rhythm of life stays the same. Familiar things remain right where they've always been. But somewhere deeper, you begin to feel that something is different, not obvious, not something you can explain right away. Just a very subtle shift in the way you respond to everything around you. You're not as rushed as before, not as pulled by that quiet sense of lack whenever money comes to mind. Instead, a small pause appears. A pause just long enough for you to realize maybe things don't have to be as urgent as you once believed. And in that pause, there's a kind of calm that feels unfamiliar, yet strangely real. Like standing in the middle of a river, and for the first time, you're no longer trying to swim against the current. You just stand there, feeling the water move around you, not resisting, not forcing, just being. Maybe before, you were used to doing something right away, fixing, changing, reaching for something specific. But now, a part of you begins to understand. Not every movement needs to be seen immediately. Not every process needs instant results. Some things take time to form. They need space to breathe. And perhaps, what's unfolding within you right now is one of those things. You might notice you no longer react as strongly to financial worries. Thoughts that once felt heavy now pass a little more gently. Not because everything is resolved, but because the way you see them has changed. And that shift, as quiet as it is, carries a very different kind of weight. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't try to prove anything. But it's enough to make you pause and ask yourself, who am I becoming? Maybe you don't have a clear answer yet, and that's okay. Because sometimes, questions like that don't need to be answered right away. They just need to be held for a little while, so you can keep walking forward with a new awareness, an awareness that you're no longer standing where you once were, that something within you has begun to rearrange everything into a different order, lighter, deeper, and maybe truer. Not everyone around you will notice. In fact, no one may say anything at all. But, you can feel it in the way you think, in the way you choose, in the way you face what once made you uneasy. And if you listen long enough, you may begin to sense that this shift is not random. It feels like a quiet reminder that another path is slowly opening. There's no need to rush toward it. Just notice it and allow yourself to slow down just a little, to see more clearly, to understand more deeply. And maybe, from these very subtle signals, a new journey is already beginning to take shape, in a way only you can truly feel. There was a time when you looked at money as something always ahead of you, something to reach, a milestone to touch, and somehow that feeling of not enough seemed to stay with you no matter how hard you tried. Maybe you told yourself, just a little more, just a bit more stability, just a bit more clarity, and then you'd finally feel at ease. But those just a little more moments, they kept stretching on. And that sense of enough never quite arrived until recently. Not because you suddenly have more, not because everything became perfect. It's just the way you see things has started to change. You no longer measure your worth by numbers. You no longer compare your path to someone else's. You begin to realize everyone moves at their own rhythm, their own way. And your rhythm doesn't need to match anyone else's. There's a noticeable lightness now. When you're no longer trying to prove that you're moving forward, you don't feel the need to rush and show it, or explain it. You simply live in your own way. And somehow, that alone feels like enough. This sense of enough isn't about stopping. It doesn't take away your drive. If anything, it brings a different kind of energy, not driven by pressure, but by clarity from within. You start choosing more carefully, not out of fear of being wrong, but because you understand what truly matters to you. You no longer say yes to everything, just to feel like you're not falling behind. You choose less, but you choose deeper. And interestingly, when you stop chasing everything, what truly fits you begins to appear more naturally. No noise, no need to prove anything, just the right moment, the right way. You might notice some opportunities you once passed by are now returning, but with a different feeling. This time, you don't look at them with urgency. You look at them with calm. You no longer ask, will this get me there faster? Instead, you ask, does this truly fit who I am? And once that question changes, the way you move changes with it. Enough is not a destination. It feels more like a foundation. A place where you can stand steady before choosing your next step, not because you have to move, but because you want to. And maybe this is what begins to open things up in a very different way, not through pressure, but through alignment, like the moment you stop trying to control the river and begin to let it carry you in its natural direction, not necessarily easier, but more real. And from that place, new doors are no longer something you have to search for. They seem to find their way to you, not rushed, not loud, just when you're ready to see them. And then, as you begin to feel more grounded in that sense of enough, something quietly begins to unfold. You start looking back at the things that once passed through your life with a different lens. There's no regret, no self-blame for what you may have missed. Just a gentle realization that some things at a certain point in time simply weren't meant for you yet. Maybe it was an idea you once considered, but set aside because it didn't feel certain enough. A path you briefly thought about, but turned away from because it didn't seem to fit the standard. A small opportunity, so small you barely recognized it as an opportunity at all, and you let it pass. Not wrong, just not the right time. But now, as you look back, it feels different. You're no longer seeing things through the pressure of having to make use of everything, no longer feeling like you have to grab it all just to keep up. Instead, you see them like pieces, small pieces scattered along your path, and somehow, only after something shifted within you, those pieces begin to speak to each other. You start to notice meaning in things that once felt ordinary, a brief conversation, a passing suggestion, a small task you once thought didn't matter. Now, they're no longer invisible. They stand out more clearly, not because they changed, but because you did. You're no longer rushing to judge, no longer asking, will this get me there faster? Instead, you ask, does this feel right to me? And the moment that question changes, the way you move begins to change with it. From there, opportunities start to appear in a very different form. Not flashy, not immediately life-changing, sometimes just a simple offer, an unclear direction, something without a clear answer yet. But you no longer need everything to be clear from the start. You allow yourself to try, to explore, to walk a path, without needing to know exactly where it will lead. Not because you've become more reckless, but because you've learned to trust what you feel. And maybe that's the real difference. Because real opportunities rarely arrive with a clear label. They don't announce, this will change your life. They just appear quietly. So quietly you might miss them if you're still searching for something bigger. But when you slow down, when you're no longer caught in the need to prove anything, you begin to see those small things carry a depth you didn't notice before, like a door that doesn't swing wide open, but gently. Cracks just enough for you to see the light inside, but not enough to reveal the whole picture. And you stand there, not rushing in, but no longer walking away either. You stay a little longer. You observe, you feel, and then, in a very natural way, you know whether you want to step forward. No confirmation needed, no grand sign required, just a quiet sense within you, whispering, maybe I should try. And perhaps that's how real change begins. Not through loud decisions, but through small steps, chosen from a very still place. A place where you're no longer chasing opportunities, but beginning to realize the right ones have always been there, waiting for you to see them in your own way. And then, as you begin to recognize those small opportunities, a deeper shift starts to unfold, not on the outside, but in the way you see yourself. There was a time when you may have tied your worth to what you achieved, the numbers, the results, the things that could be measured, and at times, you may have asked yourself if you were enough based on those standards. But slowly, a different feeling begins to take shape. You no longer see yourself through what's missing. You no longer try to fit into predefined molds. You begin to realize a person's value isn't defined by how much they have, but by how they live, how they show up, and how they meet their own life. This doesn't happen all at once. It's not something that shifts overnight. It happens little by little, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you respond to your mistakes, in the way you decide what deserves your energy. You stop trying to become a perfect version of who you think you should be. You stop forcing yourself to meet expectations that were never truly yours. You begin to listen more, not to find quick answers, but to understand yourself more honestly. And from there, a different kind of confidence starts to emerge. Not loud, not something you need to prove, but a quiet steadiness. You know who you are, even if no one acknowledges it. You understand your worth, even when it's not yet reflected in visible results. And that steadiness begins to change the way you relate to money. You no longer accept what makes you feel smaller. You no longer agree to things that don't reflect your value. You begin to choose from a clearer place, not because you want more, but because you understand what is truly worthy of you. And something interesting happens here. When you stop trying to increase your value by chasing outward things, that value becomes more visible on its own. Not everyone will see it right away, but the right things will. It's like a frequency. When you shift the way you resonate, what you attract begins to shift as well. Not because you're trying to attract anything, but because you've become someone different, someone who is no longer seeking validation, but learning to live in alignment with who they truly are. And from that place, the flow of finances begins to move differently, not suddenly, not in a dramatic shift, but gradually. You may start to notice opportunities feel more aligned, choices become clearer, and what no longer fits naturally falls away. No force required, just as you change how you define your value, life begins to reflect that change back to you. And maybe this isn't only about money, it's about how you stand in your own life, with respect, with understanding, and with a quiet, honest knowing that you have always been enough from the very beginning. And then, as you begin to see your value in this new way, something else starts to emerge. Not a change on the outside at first, but a feeling, hard to name, yet unmistakable when it arrives, a sense of steadiness. Not the kind where everything is perfect, not where every problem disappears. Life still holds uncertainty. There are still days when answers aren't clear, but within you, there's less shaking. You're no longer pulled by every small shift. You don't react immediately when something feels off. Instead, a space appears between things, a space just wide enough for you to see before you respond. And that space begins to change the way you live. You start to realize not everything needs to be solved right away. Not every emotion needs to be pushed aside so quickly. You allow things to be there for a moment, not to delay, but to understand. And from that understanding, a deeper steadiness begins to form. No matter what happens, I'll be okay. Not as something you say to comfort yourself, but as something you genuinely feel. You don't need everything to be perfect to feel safe. You don't need to know every next step to keep moving forward. You begin to trust yourself in your ability to face whatever comes. And that quietly changes everything, especially when it comes to money. You no longer see it as the thing that defines your security. You no longer let it control your emotions with every rise and fall. You begin to step back from old reactions. Money comes in. You receive it, but you don't lose yourself in it. Money goes out. You respond, but you don't panic. Not because you have everything figured out, but because you no longer feel out of control. You begin to see true stability doesn't come from controlling everything outside of you. It comes from holding yourself steady, even when things shift. And from there, the way you make decisions begins to change. You're no longer choosing from fear, no longer deciding because you're afraid of missing out. You choose from clarity, from a quiet place within. You can say no without feeling like you're lacking. You can wait without feeling left behind. You no longer chase every opportunity that appears. You no longer feel the need to hold on to everything. You begin to understand not everything that appears is meant for you, and what is meant for you won't require you to rush. There's a different kind of freedom here, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from the pressure within. You're no longer pushed forward by old fears, no longer pulled back by expectations that were never yours. You stand in the middle, and you choose, more slowly, but more surely. And maybe that's what makes the difference. Because when you stop chasing money, you begin to build a different relationship with it. One not rooted in fear, but in understanding and trust. It doesn't need to be perfect, just steady enough. And from that place, things continue to open in a way that feels uniquely yours, quietly real, and deeply aligned with who you are becoming. And then, from that steadiness, you begin to look back at the path you've walked, not with regret, not to deny what once felt right, just a clear realization that some of the ways you chose before helped bring you here. But maybe they're not meant to carry you forward anymore. You don't reject them. You appreciate them. But you no longer hold on to them. Maybe it was a familiar way of making money, a job that once gave you a sense of security, a path many around you are still walking, and for a long time, you believed this was the only way. But recently, a quiet question begins to rise. What if I don't go this way anymore? Not as a sudden decision, not as a moment where you leave everything behind. Just, you begin to allow yourself to think differently, to imagine a different way of working, a different rhythm of living, a different way of creating value than before. And this isn't always easy, because the old path, even if it no longer fits, is still familiar. It makes sense. It feels structured. It has steps already laid out. While the new path feels unclear, not everyone understands it, and not everything can be explained. There are moments you wonder if you're slowing down, if you're turning towards something less certain. But when you pause long enough, you begin to realize something. Slower doesn't mean wrong, different, doesn't mean lost. And sometimes, the steps that don't look like anyone else's are the ones closest to who you truly are. You no longer feel the need to do what everyone else is doing. You no longer follow a fixed formula. You begin to build your own way. Maybe it's a small project, an unfinished idea, a direction not many people have chosen, but you feel connected to it, not because it promises something big, but because it reflects you. You may not move as fast as before. You may not see results right away, but you feel that you're moving in the right direction, and that feeling can't be replaced by any external guarantee. There's a quiet kind of freedom here. You're no longer tied to old expectations, no longer pushed to achieve something within a fixed timeline. You allow yourself to move at your own pace, to slow down when needed, to continue when it feels right, not to avoid difficulty, but to move with awareness. And within that choice, you begin to build a different foundation, not built on urgency, not built on proving anything, but built on honesty. Honest with what you want, honest with how you work, honest with the value you bring. And maybe what truly makes the difference is not where you're going, but how you're moving. Because when you stop trying to become someone who fits everyone else, you begin to become someone who fits yourself. And from that place, what is meant to last may not arrive all at once, but it begins to take shape. Little by little, not too fast, not always clear, but real enough for you to keep going. And maybe that's how a new path is truly created, not by searching for it somewhere far away, but by choosing to walk forward in a way that is truly your own. And then, as you begin to walk your own path, something very subtle starts to reveal itself. Not every change needs to be seen from the outside. Not every step forward needs to be named. There are things happening within you, deep, real, yet without a clear shape. No one asks, no one confirms, no one tells you you're on the right path. And still, you know, not through logic, but through a quiet feeling within. You begin to notice. You no longer react the way you used to. Things that once felt overwhelming no longer carry the same weight. You're not pulled by every small shift. You don't let numbers define your mood the way they once did. You find yourself standing in a different place, not higher, just more steady. And from there, you begin to see everything with just enough distance, enough not to be swept away, but still close enough to feel. You become more aware of how you choose, no longer rushed, no longer pushed by the fear of missing out. You slow down, not because you've lost motivation, but because you understand what's truly worth continuing. And what's interesting is, these changes make no noise, no applause, no defining moment to mark them. Just one day you realize you're no longer who you used to be. No announcement needed, no explanation required. You're simply different. A little lighter, a little clearer, and far more calm. Others may not notice right away. They may still see you the same way, but you no longer need them to see, because this time, you're not changing to be recognized. You're changing because you no longer want to stay the same. And that creates a very different kind of wealth. Not something you can count, not something you can compare, but a state where you're no longer dependent on how things look outside to feel okay. You can move through uncertain days without panic. You can stand in front of choices without rushing to decide. You begin to trust your own rhythm, to trust your own process. And once that trust is there, you no longer feel the need to prove anything. No need to explain why you chose this path. No need to make others understand, because you understand. And that is enough. There's a quiet freedom in this. You're no longer bound by how others see you, no longer shaped by standards that were never yours. You move forward, lighter. Not because the path is easier, but because you're no longer carrying what once weighed you down. And maybe this is one of the most valuable things you have right now. A change no one needs to witness, but real enough for you to feel every single day. Not loud, not showy, just when you look back, you know, you've come a very long way. And then, as you arrive here, you may begin to realize something very simple, yet not always easy to accept before. Things don't have to happen fast. They don't have to be rushed. They don't have to be pushed forward by worry or pressure. You no longer feel the need to control every step. You no longer need to know exactly where everything is going. Because a part of you now understands what is truly meant for you rarely arrives in a hurry. It doesn't come as a sudden shift that turns everything upside down in a single moment. It comes little by little, soft, slow, but clear enough for you to recognize when you're ready. Like the break of morning, light doesn't switch on all at once. It spreads gently, gradually, until one moment you realize you're already in a different space. And maybe what's opening in your life right now feels the same. It's not a fixed destination, not a milestone you have to reach. It's a journey where each step aligns more closely with who you are right now. You don't need to become someone else to receive it. You only need to keep being yourself. But the version of you are slowly becoming. And what's different this time is that this story is no longer just about money. It goes deeper than that. It touches how you feel about enough, how you see value, how you allow yourself to receive without feeling the need to prove anything. You're no longer asking, am I enough yet? You begin to feel, where am I on my path? And from that question, everything becomes lighter. You don't need to push yourself faster. You don't need to compare your pace to someone else's. You simply move with your own rhythm, slowing down when needed, continuing when it feels right, not to delay, but to let each step carry meaning. And maybe what makes this journey different is not where it leads you, but how you feel while walking it. You're not as tense as before. You no longer feel the need to achieve something just to prove your worth. You begin to see, just being here, understanding yourself a little more, making choices with awareness, is already a kind of forward movement. And if you are in this phase right now, maybe you don't need another answer just yet. Maybe all you need is a pause, a slightly slower rhythm, not to stop, but to truly feel what is shifting within you, softly, but honestly. And maybe, from that quiet softness, a fuller journey is already taking shape, in a way that is entirely your own,